So yeah, basically we're waiting for all these people to come in. Thanks for being patient with this. Great, I can see people joining. We'll wait just a few seconds more. Great, I think we can start. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the EPC Policy Dialogue, a sustainable future for European cities addressing citizens' wishes, kindly supported by the European Investment Bank. My name is Melanie Fessler. I am a policy analyst at EPC and very happy to moderate today's discussion. Before we start, you know the practicalities of an online meeting. I'll give you a quick run through. We will have the introductory remarks by our panelists, and then we are looking forward to engaging in this discussion with you in a Q&A session. Therefore, I would ask you right away to already put your questions in the Q&A box, write already short questions. But of course, you can also raise your hand and ask your questions later in person. Only to start with a few words on today's topic. Cities and their inhabitants have a key role to play in achieving the ambitions of the European Green Deal. They are big consumers of energy and resources, but also regulators and service providers in the energy, mobility, and building sector. They hold transformative power there. At the same time, they can also provide a valuable testing ground for involving and engaging citizens in the green transition. And indeed, many European cities have launched their green transitions with ambitious projects and are working closely with their citizens in making these deliver. During the conference on the future of Europe, citizens have also clearly expressed that they wish for more greener cities. Now, due to the Russian war on Ukraine and its impact on energy and food, the urgency to mobilize citizens to reduce demand for resources such as fossil fuels is greater than ever. Therefore, enhancing the dialogue between city authorities and citizens to accelerate the transition to a more sustainable future is also more needed than ever. So today we would like to discuss the role of cities and citizens in driving the green transition, the visions and hopes that citizens have put forward during the conference on the future of Europe, the state of play in meeting citizens' expectations, as well as the role of EU policies and investments in constructing green, sustainable, and just European cities. Therefore, I'm very happy that we have 5 wonderful speakers joining us today. With us is Patrick Child, Deputy Director General and Mission Manager for the Horizon Europe Mission for Cities from the European Commission, Anna Pasková, Director in the Department for Environmental Policy in the Environmental Ministry of the Czech Republic, but she had a really important role during the conference on the future of Europe in chairing the Climate Change and Environment Working Group. Neil Valentine, Head of Division for Urban Mobility from the European Investment Bank. Brooke Flanagan, Senior Project Coordinator from Eurocities, and giving us an inspiring example, Marine Fabre, Policy Officer from Grenoble-Alpes Métropole. And without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Patrick, who will introduce us to the Horizon mission on cities, the role of citizen engagement, and synergies between different support programs.
Well, thank you very much, Melanie, and very happy to be here. Delighted to have this opportunity to contribute to what I'm sure is going to be a rich and lively discussion about the sustainable future for European cities, but in particular how we address them and their citizens' wishes. I'm participating in my capacity as mission manager for the European Union mission for 100 climate neutral and smart cities within the context of our Research and Innovation Framework Programme Horizon Europe. But as Deputy Director General in DG Environment, I also have direct contact with some of our other cities programmes, and so happy to share perspectives from that too. Today, I perhaps just touch on 3 points in particular. Firstly, how the city's mission is going to help us to lead the transition to more sustainable cities. Second, how the city's mission specifically is engaging with our citizens. And third, how we can use the city's mission to capitalize on opportunities for synergies across different EU programs and policy partners. So starting with my first message on the city's mission and its role in supporting transition to more sustainable cities. As we all know, the global challenges of climate change and biodiversity loss threaten the very existence of humanity. And this is combined today with the very acute threats to our energy supply and security caused by the Russian invasion in Ukraine. Cities are strongly impacted by these challenges, and therefore we need to do everything we can to help them to become climate neutral and sustainable within the shortest possible time. And this is really vital as a contribution to our global target under the European Green Deal of becoming the first climate neutral continent by 2050. The Climate Neutral and Smart Cities mission aims to deliver 100 climate neutral and smart cities by 2030. At the same time, it seeks to empower these cities to become role models for all European cities to become climate neutral, we hope, by 2050. To achieve what we set out to with this very ambitious programme, we need a systemic approach to urban transformation. The transformation requires not only technological innovation, but also fundamental changes in governance, institutional policy frameworks, financial instruments, and also a strong dimension of social innovation. And so I'm really happy that the 100 EU cities that are participating in the city's mission, representing 12% of the total EU population, well mirror the broad diversity of the European cities landscape. And they seek to achieve the necessary transformations through democratic, transparent, and participatory decision-making processes for empowerment and buy-in by all relevant stakeholders, actors, starting, of course, with our citizens. And the platform, the mission platform, run by a consortium of 33 organizations under the project Net Zero Cities, is up and running and building a community of practice, which I wholeheartedly invite all of you to join. Coming now to my second point about how we are tackling this vital dimension of citizens' engagement through the city's mission. It's obviously crucial that we use the governance structures that we're developing to reach out to local communities and engage with citizens, people, to ensure that there is societal uptake of new solutions and the approaches to make cities more sustainable. Cities bring very original perspectives to research and innovation and policymaking, and their engagement can help bridge gaps between science, markets, and societies. This is especially important in the fundamental transformation that we are addressing, the transition to climate neutrality. It requires not just innovation in technology, but profound changes in our lifestyles and behaviors, along with innovative governance models. And these transformations cannot be imposed top-down. They need to be embraced and shaped by citizens themselves. During the conceptual phase, the city's mission organized 13 citizen engagement events across EU member states to ensure that the design of the mission fully takes into account the actual lived experience of people living and working in cities. Polled on personal priorities for the respective cities' transition towards climate neutrality, an overwhelming majority of citizens highlighted firstly mobility, energy, urban infrastructure, and behavioral change as the 4 key priorities to tackle. As we've seen from the conclusions and recommendations of the Conference on the Future of Europe, citizens, when asked and listened to, will make sweeping and sometimes unexpectedly original contributions to policy design. In the recommendations on the panel of the Conference on the Future of Europe on climate change alone, there are suggestions to formulate a directive on urban development programs, to fulfill environmental requirements, to sanction and to subsidize cities depending on their performance on public transport with regards to the environment and pollution, and to support urban mobility for example, through investing in bicycle lanes. And I therefore believe that the political processes will be less and less likely to succeed if in future they do not include directly the people whose policy decisions are affected, and including them from the outset. And with the city's mission, we're aiming to do exactly that by associating impacted groups and people from the start in all of the discussions and decisions that we're taking. And just then, before I conclude, a few words on the city's mission and synergies, and really how we can show that we can deliver better results by linking up different EU and national initiatives, by making links with regional funds, with national programs, and making connections with other actors like the European Investment Bank, and delighted that they are co-organizing and leading this session today. Because I think if we can transform from an EU bank supporting climate into the EU Climate Bank, which is, I think, what the European Investment Bank is setting out to do, the bank has potential to be one of the largest global financiers of climate action and environmental sustainability. And that's why I'm so much looking forward to Neil's remarks a bit later on about how the bank is making cities more sustainable. And this is a key part of our transformation. And we certainly would keen to develop further our partnership with the European Investment Bank in supporting long-term green investment as we connect with other programs. And we think there's in particular a complementary role to the financial advice and support that the mission platform is going to be offering. For example, through the Elena platform, which the bank has been pursuing in support of the cities in the Global Covenant of Mayors for a number of years. And so within the Commission, we're working also on synergies with other EU funding programs, so Horizon Europe, but also Connecting Europe facility, and discussing with other actors as well how we can really federate different EU funding programs in support of the mission. And so, look, in closing, I'd like to invite all of you to join forces with us in the city's mission to help leverage resources and capacities across Europe through ever more intense collaborations. It's an opportunity that we need to seize with both hands if we want to make our cities climate neutral, resilient, livable, and sustainable. And at the heart of all of this, citizens' engagement and participatory processes are going to be vitally necessary in making cities sustainable and adapting to future challenges. Thanks very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Patrick, for this inspiring introductory remarks and for giving us a good overview over the city's mission, and especially for highlighting that we need a systemic approach when we are talking about urban development to make cities more sustainable, and also that we have to think about the governance structures that we need to make profound changes away from the only top-down approach. As you have already picked up on the conference on the future of Europe, where citizens have made inspiring recommendations, I would now like to give the floor to Anna Pasková to further develop on what has happened during the conference and what we can learn from that. Please, Anna, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melanie, and good afternoon, everyone. I will follow up on what Patrick has already taught us, how important participatory methods are. And it's also the part of my intervention today to talk about the one and a unique participatory event, which was the conference on the future of Europe, which was a citizen-led series of debate and discussions that ran from April 2021 till May 2022 this year, and which enabled people from across Europe to share their ideas and that helped to shape our common future and to arrive to the mutual view of our future. I have to say that during the process, it was challenged, firstly, the process as it was by COVID. It was, prolonged by COVID measures. And afterwards, it just twisted around by the Russian aggression in Ukraine. And so all of the participants in the conference had to, face so many challenges, but even though they arrived to conclusions. Just to give you the snapshot of how the conference looked like. It was co-chaired by the 3 EU institutions, the European Commission, the Council of the European Council, also the European Parliament. And the idea was to have the voices of citizens, the European citizens, to be heard. And it was supported by the Common Secretariat. The very important part of the conference were so-called European citizens panels, where a representative part of European population was chosen. There were 200 European citizens, different genders, different income groups, etc. And they arrived within the European conference, European citizens panels towards a couple of recommendations. And those recommendations were presented to conference plenary, which was the body where the representative of the European Parliament, national parliaments, European Commission, the Council, the member states, governments, but also regional authorities and also social partners or youth also gathered together to discuss the outcomes from the citizens panels. Also, throughout the conference, 9 working groups were set up to pre-discuss the outcomes from the panels. And that's where my job came in as a chair of one of the working group on climate and environment to steer the debate and to arrive 2 proposals that were, consensual from the point of representatives in the working group that were from the European Parliament, from the national parliaments, from the citizens, which actually played great role because they were able to defend and share more why they formulated the recommendations as they did. We clustered our debate amongst 4 different topics. First of all, we were talking about measures proposed towards more sustainable agriculture, food production, biodiversity, ecosystems, and of course, how to decrease pollution. A lot of recommendations targeted climate change, energy, and transport, and it was also mentioned by Patrick. Also, the citizens felt that it couldn't be, or it shouldn't be that difficult to arrive to some sustainable consumption patterns, packaging and production, and also, and not least, very much we were talking about the need for information, awareness, and dialogue. This was the last group that was largely discussed. We arrived to recommendations that were oriented on the different levels, from national government, the European Commission, what can be done. But when it came to the cities, it very much resonated that the citizens wanted to see adaptation, both adaptation and mitigation measures to be set in the urban areas. And very much resonated those topics connected to public transport, cycling, green spaces, also to have these mandatory green cities programs that would set low emission zones, that would have dedicated car-free zones without, having this negative impact on environment. So those would be like the specific recommendations we can, elaborate more on during our discussion. But I would like to state once again that even though the recommendations from the European Citizens Panels were formulated before the Russian attack on Ukraine, during our further discussion, we arrived that the measures and proposals are fit to be implemented because they would lead us through this, security and energy crisis. So just to voice again what the European citizens had said, they would like to have the future with safe, sustainable, and climate responsible food production, also to protect biodiversity and to strive for elimination of all kinds of pollution. Also to have high quality infrastructure and connectivity, also through particularly public transport, circular economy, to be less vulnerable when it comes to material dependencies, to have better and longer lasting products. So I would stop here because the measures that are tackled under the European Green Deal were also echoed by the citizens, and they were voted as fit for the turbulent future we are living through. So I will stop here and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Anna, and thank you especially for highlighting that citizens also took into account while they were highlighting the energy and transport challenges. We mostly focus on that they were giving a role also to agriculture, biodiversity, the ecosystems, all sorts of pollution, thinking of circular economy, basically thinking of all the dimensions of the Green Deal actually. That was reflected in the citizens' recommendations. So thank you very much. And then I would like to hand over to Neil to give us an insight and his reflections on the investment side of all this, to put it simply. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Melanie. So you might be wondering what a bank is doing talking about citizen involvement and public stakeholder engagement and all of these things. Well, I mean, fundamentally, we're a public bank. We were created by the Treaty of Rome. So we're one of the original institutions. We're a big institutional partner of the Commission. We, until recently, have had a bit of a lower profile. That's been changing over the last 10 years or so as we've intensified our relationship with the Commission, and we've been taking more money in grant from them to do certain jobs. But I mean, fundamentally, our job is to lend money. So we can't invent money, but what we can do is we can try and make sure it's used efficiently. And I suppose that's really at the heart of what we do as a public bank. I mean, we are policy driven. So all the things that you're talking about are things that we care about. We're looking for in our projects. Patrick mentioned we're becoming the climate bank. The climate bank, absolutely, it's a big corporate objective of the EIBs is to push the transition to a low carbon economy. But as those of you involved in that sort of work know, environment and social considerations go hand in glove with climate. So it's a package. And that's reflected in the new EU taxonomy. You can't claim that you're saving the world from a climate perspective if you're ruining the environment while you do it. You know, these are the sorts of things that that matter to the bank. So what do we do? Well, and I've mentioned lending money. We also provide advisory support, and we do that basically through partnerships with the Commission. So the program that Patrick is running, the climate neutral cities, is being supported by the bank. Patrick's team has put in place a very competent commercial platform, and I think 30 partners or so, very well funded, big range of skills to offer city partners. That's not what we're trying to duplicate. What we're trying to do is to come in and provide a perspective that a bank can bring on structuring, on raising capital, on prioritization, issues that commercially you would find difficult to obtain. And you know, this is obviously is our value added, and it's our perspective, and it's something that we've learned over a long partnership with the cities, and we've been lending to the cities since we were since we were established. So we've probably got, what, 60 or 70 years worth now of experience working alongside municipal entities. So what can the bank do tangibly? So we can give advice, and we've got different programs. The big one to remember, if you're interested in the bank, is InvestEU. This is the sort of umbrella one-stop shop for advisory through the bank. The bank has funds available to help promoters, and that includes cities and cities entities, to prepare projects, to accelerate projects. We have a number of other programs, notably Elena, which again, Patrick mentioned, thank you, which is an energy efficiency initiative, predominantly in housing, but also in public transport as well. And that is about implementation support. So it's a very useful it provides a useful thing for the cities. It provides support for actual implementation, be that procurement, be that supervision, whatever. But it's really about making sure the investment gets done. And then many of you will be familiar with JASPERS, which is the long-running program where the bank has supported member states receiving structural funds. And that's been running now for 10, 12 years, and that's very well established, and we work with a lot of cities through the JASPERS program. So we're providing a lot of advice. The other thing that we do, of course, is that once we get to the actual investment stage, we sign finance contracts with people, and that gives us some power, because once you've got a contract, you undertake to do certain things. Now, we ask people to do all the normal things like pay us back our money, please. But we also ask them to do other things like obey law. Well, that's fine. That everybody has to do that. There's that's a basic tenet of contract law, is you obey the law. But we also ask that they follow EU regulations, EU directives. We bring our own conditions. So we're looking for promoters to run procurement processes appropriately. We're looking at the planning context, especially in cities. We're asking questions about, well, why are you doing that? How does that work with everything else you're doing? So if it's an urban transport project, we're looking for the Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan. If it's if we're looking for energy production plans, whatever it is, and we want to see that those have been through due process and procedure. So if municipalities want to take advantage of EIB funding, and typically we are better value than the commercial banks. I mean, that's one of the beauties of being a public bank, is we're not chasing profit, we're chasing outcomes and impacts. We're typically a bit cheaper. We have better, we like to think we offer better conditions. We are obviously much less commercially aggressive. So we have a problem-solving frame of mind, rather than a, take you to court and get our money back frame of mind, which is kind of the other end of the spectrum in the commercial lending world. So these are the sorts of things that we can do to stimulate public participation. We do it indirectly, of course, but we're asking the public authorities to make sure that they do these things. We also publish details of the projects that we support. So we have a summary that is published for every transaction, for every project, called an environmental and social data sheet. It's a public statement of what we know about the environmental impacts and social impacts of a project. That goes out for every single project that we do. We normally also publish links to non-technical summaries and indeed environmental impact assessments that have been produced. So we're also enabling people to see the right sorts of information. It's not quite the same thing as actually going out and asking them, which is obviously what Anna was talking about, but it's effectively seeing that the people using the money on their behalf have been doing some of these things. So I think that's how I see the bank helping the process. You know, we're selecting projects that are coherent with EU policy. We're looking that people are following directives, regulations. We're looking to see that they are trying to get a coherent planning context. We also look at the cost-benefit analysis. So do these things economically make sense? When obviously when that's possible to calculate, but for transport, for energy, that makes a lot of sense. So these are the sorts of things I think that the bank contributes. So it's on one side it's advice, on the other side it's, you know, gentle persuasion through our finance contracts to adopt good practice. And we have some very long-standing relationships with many cities in Europe. I mean, one of the things that we observed very quickly was that many of the cities that Patrick has selected for his program are already borrowers with the bank. So there's a huge overlap, lots of synergies between what Patrick's trying to do and what we're supporting. So I think that's where I'll leave it. I'm very happy to take any questions if anybody wants to understand a little bit more about why a banker cares about any of this stuff. So thank you.
Thank you, Neil, for giving us an insight in what the EIB is offering, and also telling us that there is advisory support out there. A big part of it, it's not always about getting funds, getting grants, but also knowing how to spend it wisely and spend the money efficiently. So thank you very much, and also for underlining that by selecting the project, you make sure that the money is invested in coherence with the EU policies that are out there. So thank you for that. And please, Brooke, take the floor and give us your views on sustainable cities and the citizens' recommendations from the conference. Thank you.
Thanks, Melanie, and thank you for having me today. Yeah, I think my opening question was the role of cities in achieving the Green Deal targets. I think it's the shorter answer is probably what isn't the role of cities in some of this, but it's very good to hear from Anna that the role of the Green Deal targets and the a lot of the citizens kind of wish list, shall we say, coming from the Conference of the Future of Europe are very well aligned. So cities really are genuinely leading the way on sustainability, on creating sustainable places for people to live and work. And they're implementing many programs, many investments, many innovations aimed at achieving those Green Deal targets. We know that many of the cities that are our members have been working in these areas for a very long time, sometimes on their own initiative, often on their own initiative, as well as through a lot of different EU programs, such as the Covenant of Mayors, which now has a target of climate neutrality by 2050, and more recently through other programs such as the Green City Accord, which is widening out some of those political commitments at local level to other areas such as biodiversity and air quality and noise. We've also seen a lot of these actions showcased through European, well, being acknowledged at the European level as well through the European Green Capital Awards every year. And now, as we're all talking about all the 100 cities that have been selected as part of the Climate Neutral and Smart Cities by 2030 mission, 377 cities actually applied to be part of that mission, which really shows that there is a high level of ambition there amongst cities when it comes to reducing or tackling climate change in particular. So what are cities doing? Well, a lot. Obviously, a lot of the things that were on for the Green Deal and for the Conference of the Future of Europe really come down to things for citizens around quality of life and well-being at that local level. And this is obviously a very important focus for cities. Just a few examples, on climate and energy. They are working on building renovation, reducing the amount of energy used in buildings, the development of renewable energy, particularly solar and wind, increasing cycling infrastructure, improving public transport, electrifying public transport and heating systems, creating one-stop shops for homeowners to help them to renovate their own homes and improve the energy efficiency, something that's incredibly important at the moment with the rising cost of energy and cost of living more generally. Urban greening, biodiversity, nature-based solutions. These are really important to citizens, obviously, for their own well-being, access to green space, but also increasing the resilience to climate impacts in cities, something that we've seen, I think, has become ever more important and certainly much more in focus after the high temperatures this summer and some of the flooding we've seen in the last few weeks in parts of Europe. Air quality is another area. Low emission zones is something that cities are implementing to try and improve the quality of life, health and well-being for their citizens, improving some of the air quality monitoring, trying to encourage active mobility over driving cars. We're also seeing a lot of things happening around smart cities, using the digital transformation and technology to improve the local environment and the quality of public services, and also transparency and citizens' access to data as well. And innovation, which has also been mentioned. Cities are testing new approaches and new technologies to improve sustainability. And that new approaches thing is very important, as I think Patrick mentioned. It brings into the view of innovative governance, citizen engagement, stakeholder engagement, all of these important players that need to come together to ensure sustainability at the local level. We've also seen citizen participation, the different participatory methodologies that Anna mentioned, really also becoming more and more important at city level, and how cities are really involving citizens. One of the, obviously cities are the level of government closest to citizens. So they do have a kind of additional responsibility there to ensure that citizens are part of the decision-making process and sort of designing different approaches. So for instance, we've seen quite a lot of things happening at local level around here. Participatory budgeting is an area that is growing. We see that in places like Paris and Lisbon. Citizens' assemblies and panels, which I think we're going to hear a bit more about from Marine in Grenoble. Citizen co-design processes. For instance, Nantes had a co-design process with citizens to develop their climate plan. We're seeing energy communities being created in different cities, co-management of public spaces, which is something that's happening in Bologna. We're seeing things like using new technology like apps for gamification to help citizens understand how they can change their behavior, how they can do things more sustainably in their own lives. And we're also now seeing the rise of things like citizen science, citizen observatories and citizen measurement being rolled out in cities. And this is a great approach that cities are using in different elements of sustainability, in monitoring biodiversity, water quality, noise, traffic, and anyone here in Brussels would also be aware of the big air pollution measurement or program Curious in Air, which had citizens applying to have air pollution monitoring tubes outside their houses. There was even one on the European Parliament. So to really expand the monitoring of different environmental factors, but also within that process, really engaging people in the issue, the causes, the solutions, and the policy making in response to that. But one of the things that obviously we need to ensure in all of this is that the transition in all of this, the social component, is indeed just and inclusive. We need to make sure that in these participatory methodologies and all the work that we're doing to ensure a green transition, that everyone is included, that it's not just the sort of usual groups that are part of this. We know that there are hard to reach groups in cities. They're hard to reach for a reason. But it's important that no one is left behind. So we really do have to look at different ways, different methodologies for engaging with people in those hard to reach groups. It's obviously it's very important, but often, you know, there are people who have a lot on. There are a lot of competing interests. Perhaps there's distrust of authority or government. So there are a lot of different activities going on to work out how to make sure that those groups are included. The other thing is, obviously, in all of this, engaging all citizens is a challenge. Engaging some, maybe not so much, but engaging all citizens in this transition will take time. It takes time to build the relationship and the trust, the awareness, and doing this against a backdrop of some very hard and imminent deadlines around the need to significantly cut emissions, as outlined by the IPCC and others, is not easy. So there is a tension there about the kind of need for speed when it comes to decarbonisation and the time it takes to bring everyone along with us. So that's a sort of tension that we really need to manage throughout all of this as well. One of the things is, obviously, there are some challenges involved in all of this. You know, cities can't do it all by themselves. They can't obviously, they're not all individually responsible for all of the Green Deal targets, but obviously they are taking on quite a lot in their own area. But it needs to be a team effort. Funding and financing, as Niels outlined, you know, these are big issues for cities. It's not just the capital investment required for things like new zero carbon public transport, energy infrastructure, but it's also the running and maintenance costs of those that need to be factored in as well. So we're seeing sometimes now that conventional finance models maybe aren't going to work for some of the investments that are needed. We need a supply chain and skilled workforce for some of these things. We're massively changing the types of technologies from old gas boilers to new electric heat pumps. That requires different skills and expertise than we're used to. All of this needs to be supported and invested in, and that happens at different levels, you know, both at local level, regional, national, and possibly even European level. Some of the challenges as well, you know, the capacity and capability within city administrations. You know, there's a lot being taken on here, a lot of new areas for cities. Citizen engagement is evolving very rapidly. The methodologies are evolving very rapidly. So we also need to be able to ensure that those skills and expertise are captured within city administrations as well. And the other thing is that, you know, in line with the sort of, you know, we all have to do something here. It's not just the city level. It's not just cities engaging citizens. Is also in this transition, cities don't necessarily have control over everything. So whilst cities are have a really important role to play in making places more livable, healthier, and sustainable, multi-level governance is a really important element for this. Coming out also, I think, the conference looking to see more alignment between the different levels. But this is something Patrick also mentioned about having, you know, that city involvement is really crucial to policy making, and I couldn't agree more. We're not necessarily, you know, cities are very active in delivery on the ground, but they don't often have a seat at the table when it comes to policy making and regulation. So that's something I think we really need to see evolve now, and get more of that sort of seamless integration, shall we say, between policy and regulation at the different levels, and ensuring that citizen engagement is part of that. It's certainly one of the positive developments that we're starting to see resulting from the mission now. You know, with the 100 climate neutral and smart cities mission, one of the things that we've seen, Eurocities is a partner in Net Zero Cities helping to deliver the mission platform. So one of the things that we've seen there in talking to cities about their needs to become climate neutral by 2030 is the importance of multi-level governance, the importance of regulation and policy and funding and financing at those other levels of government. So we are starting to see some positive developments now with cities engaging with their national government, and in some cases an openness to actually engaging in dialogue about improving and creating a sort of more positive regulatory environment towards climate neutrality by 2030. And I'm hoping that we will see a lot more of that as the mission develops as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Brooke, for your interesting contribution and for reminding us of the importance of multi-level governance, but also for showing us what is already out there on inspiring actions on the local level and on how citizens can be engaged in the processes. And on that, I would like to hand over to Marine, who will show us how to engage citizens in Grenoble. Please take the floor, Marine.
Yes, thank you. So I will share my screen, or at least I will try. It's okay?
It's perfect, thank you. Okay. We can see it.
So I work for La Métropole de Grenoble. I don't know if all of us know where it is. So Grenoble, it's a city next to the Alps. So we are vulnerable and quite aware of the emergency. So and this year we are also green capital. So we have a lot of events and projects about climate change. And but I work specifically on this project, the Citizen Climate Convention. So shortly, the Citizen Climate Convention aims to give a voice to citizens to accelerate the fight against climate change. It's 100 citizens who are working on proposal to challenge climate change during 5 sessions or 5 weekends. And it's still an ongoing process because the last one will be in 2 weeks. So to get started with the origin of the Climate Convention, it started with the climate plan in 2020, when the Métropole adopted its climate plan, in which it was included to launch a convention, especially to mobilize citizens on the climate emergency and achieve our objectives. So during last year, we organized a convention, so it takes a lot of time, and but we will start the project at the beginning of the year. We, in fact, we asked 2 questions to the citizen. It's the mandate. They are a bit long, so I will try to reduce them. So we can summarize them in how to reduce greenhouse gas emission by 2030, and how can we reach carbon neutrality by 2050, or in a long-term way. And we decided to work to assure independence of the debate with this kind of complex governance. In fact, we elected official give mandates to the convention, and then the Métropole appointed members of the operational committee, composed by academics. And they lead, in fact, they lead the process, the work of convention. They choose the session programs, they select speakers. And in addition, we have three guardians who observe and guarantee the independence of the debate. And finally, we have us, a project team with officers helped by providers which implement the decision. About the milestone, so we select a citizen by a civic lottery at the beginning of the year, and so I already explained it. We have 5 sessions from March until October of working, so it's quite a huge project. And after, our services will analyze the proposition or proposals, and for finally we will vote them next year during a council. So about the recruitment, it was a civic lottery, as I already explained. So we choose a provider or a polling organization who rented a file of 55,000 contacts. The company called citizens or inhabitants until they had a representative sample of the population. So it means that they met the following quotas of gender, typology of living place, age, education, and also awareness to environmental issues. So that's how we choose 100 people. And after the program of the convention, the first session was about giving information on climate issues, and also about Métropole competence. And the third session was about allow to the member think about their vision, their long-term vision. And they discussed about 4 low carbon scenarios made by l'ADEME, which is a national agency. During the third session, so they met some economic stakeholders, association, officers, and last session, so in the last session, yes, they begin to think about their proposal, prioritize them, and adopt. In fact, they are actually discussing their proposal, because they are discussing more than 350 proposals. So it's a lot for us, because we begin to analyze them and instruct them. So, but most of them are about mobility, urbanism, feeding, and agriculture. And but we don't know yet what will remain at the end of the process. But what we can already say is that it's useful for us, for the Métropole, to know that after 5 weekends of formation, most of citizens are aware of the emergency or urgency to act, but they don't want coercive measures. So it's just what we can say right now. And finally, at the end of the process, we will organize several times of restitution to make known the proposal of the general public. And the member of the convention themselves will be the spokesperson, and will animate local debates about climate and stuff like that. And after, what we can say is that we are still in a representative democracy. So the convention proposal will be proposed and voted by the Métropole Council. And the specific proposition will be submitted to the relevant stakeholders in this institution, states, cities, and stuff like that. The other one, who are complex or, well, yes, complex, will be a subject of citizen votes or kind of referendum next year.
Thank you very much, Marine, for giving us an overview of how you involve citizens in Grenoble, and also what are the first results of the still ongoing process of this Convention Citoyenne. As we still do have some time, but I see that one participant has his hand up. Maybe we start the Q&A session. We have two people having their hands up. And I would like to give the floor to Harald Bürger to ask his question. I think, Harald, can you unmute your microphone? Okay, he might have changed his mind and put his hand down. Okay, so then we will take the questions that are written in the chat, and there is one question directed at Patrick, asking, most of the cities selected for the 100 climate neutral cities are not from the least developed or least innovative cities. Isn't there a danger that we further concentrate innovation and sustainability investments and efforts in the territories who are already further ahead, thus perpetuating the innovation divide? What plans are in place to widen the net of engagement and action from these cities to their neighboring territories?
Well, thanks very much for the question. And I mean, I think that the good news is that we did get an overwhelming response from cities across the whole of the European Union, the 377 cities, and it was a really tough choice to narrow down to the 100 which are now in the mission. And we've got cities from all EU member states. We've got small cities, we've got larger cities. Yes, they are cities that typically are, the most sort of committed to the objectives of climate neutrality and the goals of the mission. But there are. It isn't just the familiar, the usual suspect, and I think that that's very important. And the second thing I would say is that as well as supporting the 100 cities to become climate neutral by 2030, we're also putting in place what we call national platforms. So sort of fora where the cities in a given member state or in a group of member states come together and then can not only interact with each other, exchange best practice, but also act as a sort of source of inspiration and leadership for the cities that may have applied but not that were successful, or other cities that in their countries that want to learn from this best practice. And I was in Berlin just a few days ago to see the launch, for example, of the national platform in Germany, where we had not just the cities themselves, but also, very importantly, and it's a point that's come up, I think, in our discussion, representatives of different government ministries, who were then, able to hear what cities were saying in terms of improvements in or changes in legislation or other sort of policy orientations in order to facilitate the delivery of the sort of citizens' agendas, which we see coming up through the cities. So yes, we need to be careful not to just focus on a handful of particularly advanced cities. I believe with the choice of cities in the cities mission, we've got that more or less right. And we want those cities also to be sort of pioneers and sort of role models, ambassadors for the cities mission agenda for cities elsewhere in the European Union.
Thank you very much, Patrick, for answering this question. Another question would be, what will be the role of the car in green transformative cities? I don't know who wants to take this on.
Well, I'm an urban mobility specialist, so maybe I should have a go at that.
Thank you very much, Neil.
So this is an interesting question, because a lot of the real concerns at the moment with cars are about the carbon and the pollution. But as we move to electric cars, we cut out a lot of the, if you like, the the obvious pollution. There are still concerns, of course, with particles from tires and from brake pads, and that actually is not insignificant, because they're very small particles which we breathe. But actually, you achieve a lot of what city mayors were worried about 10 years ago by going for electric cars. But as any city knows, a traffic jam's a traffic jam, regardless of what kind of engines the cars use. So the more intelligent response to this is about land use, and it's about it then opens up a whole series of questions about accessibility, about the affordability of access. It also opens up discussions about political belief. You know, should you be allowed to pay to drive your expensive car straight into the middle of town, annoying everybody else? You know, if you're willing to pay enough money, and to a certain extent, congestion charging is a form of that kind of entitlement, if you like. But it's about, we're back to rational use of resources. You know, is it acceptable to price for the access to our cities? Is it acceptable to have lots of land consumed by parking spaces when that could be bicycle lanes and footpaths? Now, these are political choices, and we're back to giving the people, participatory democracy. It's about giving people an opportunity to express their views, and different cities have different makeups. Some are very hilly, some are very flat, some have got lots of rivers. Some have histories of alternative modes of transport. So the car is part of the mix and will stay part of the mix, but it doesn't have to dominate if we don't want it to dominate. And some cities are showing us how that could work, and others are ignoring it. So we have a spectrum to observe, and most cities can then make their own minds up about it. So the answer is, the car is there. The car is part of greening the car, if you like, making it less polluting. Is a big part of climate action. We've got to do that. But whether or not we continue to build our cities around car use is a choice that we all have to make. And I think as the bank, we don't we don't want to see new investment in capacity, but we are happy to see investment in road safety, in public transport integration, footpaths, cycle lanes, adaptation to climate change. So where existing road networks need strengthened, better drainage, environmental protection, that sort of stuff we're still willing to finance. But we don't want to see new motorways through the middle of cities, which many of our cities in Europe experienced in the 60s and 70s of the last century. So I think that's where we would be coming from at the debate. Perhaps others have a point of view too.
Thank you, Neil. Anyone else wants to come in on the question of cars in cities? No other panelists?
I might just add then that car sharing is something that we're keen on. And we think that that's a sensible way forward.
Yes, Anna, please.
I will maybe add, I would sign what Neil has said, that the car is there in the cities, but then we have to, have the public transport as a core bone of the transport within the cities. And, having local elections just last weekend in the Czech Republic, we have to say that it's a politicum how we get around the cities. But fortunately, we are further in the debate that the citizens see the local solution. As we do have the participatory measures, and the people are involved also in the planning. They want to have the solutions also for transport to get around, to have safe roads for kids for cycling. So I mean, you need the system measures on the level of, you know, the city, but then you need also the local communities for local measures to be involved. And it's great to have also these soft, you know, campaigns, having these, you know, taking 1,000 or 10,000 steps per day, forcing people to actually walk around, to get around, to get to know the city, and then to see that they don't have to take the passenger car, and also, you know, car-free days, cycling to work, all those, you know, information campaign, I would say, to get involved as much as people on board, to show that it's possible, is also helping to make the change.
Thank you, Anna. Any other intervention on this question? No? Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. I might get back to you, Neil, because we have a question directly addressed to your intervention and your role as a public bank. How do you think private investments can be mobilized locally in new and more flexible ways? And what would be the role for public-private partnerships? And how do you see venture capital supporting the transition in cities?
Those are good questions. Do you want me to answer now?
Yes,
okay,
please.
So I mean, I think this is a really interesting and very difficult discussion. Again, it's about political direction and what do people want in their city? Do they want public control of services, or do they want privately provided services? And we observe a little bit of a political divide on this, but depending on whether you're, you know, to the right or to the left of center. For the bank, I mean, ultimately, the important thing is understanding the business model. What is it? Because if you want a private partner to do something, you have to allow them to recover their money, their investments, and make money. I mean, and that's fundamentally the issue you have. Now, cities subsidize a lot of services for their people, and that's a political decision. That's entirely at the discretion of a city within the framework that their national authority sets them. But once you bring in a private sector provider, you have to be comfortable that you know what you're doing in terms of regulating the way they work. So for me, the most important thing that cities have to do is they have to be honest with themselves about what they're trying to achieve and why. You know, you can have private providers of water, and in fact, you know, we see that in some countries. But in some countries, the idea that you would pay profits to a company for supplying your water doesn't work. In some countries, you know, you see privatized bus providers. It can all be made to work, but you have to put the machinery in place, the regulatory frameworks in place, and you have to give the private sector certainty that you're not going to change the parameters halfway through their deal. And the problem with, you know, our democracies is that every 4 or 5 years we change governments, and we get this flip-flopping, so between political views. So I think that's the hardest part from a sort of a banking perspective, is believing that there's enough stability and enough political desire to make private sector participation a reality. But apart from that, I mean, there's lots of interesting things you can do to get private sector involved in you know, you can give people concessions to run bike sharing, car sharing. You can top up their profit. You can have it as a least contribution type of tender rather than a profit-making tender. You know, these things have all been thought about, but it's whether or not they're appropriate for your city and your politics and your fiscal situation. You know, so there's quite a bit of work to do. You know, there's no one size fits all. It's not neat. And public-private partnerships come in different forms. And I think that's the other thing that's important to say. You know, PPP as a financial structure is a monster. It's a very heavy contractual solution to delivering big infrastructure. It works well when there's very stable long-term demand. You know, power supply, telecoms, interurban motorways. They all work quite well as project finance, PPP, where a private provider comes in and provides it on behalf of the government under a well-defined regulatory regime. But that's not the sort of thing you need in a city necessarily. So you have to look at, what do you mean by public-private partnerships? And again, this is what I mean about being honest. You know, what the private sector financiers and providers are not good at is inventing funding. You know, ultimately there needs to be money to pay for services. And if you give it to the private sector needs paid. If you keep it in the public sector, you need to pay for providing the service. You know, where does that money come from? That's the first question you've got to answer. And I think Brooke touched on this, is that, you know, cities have huge amounts to do and they have to use their money carefully. So it's also about how they run their finances, whether or not they want the private sector involved, how they get the private sector involved. But what's clear is that for the more ambitious cities, mobilizing the money they need is going to require the private sector involved. So we will need to work out how to do some of this. And for some cities, that's maybe quite uncomfortable if it's politically not what they're expecting. So we're back to getting some cities to try it, demonstrating, you know, whether or not it works. Unfortunately, this all takes time. So I think the answer is, it's important. I think it's poorly understood. I think there's been in the past, there's been a little bit of bad behavior. Private sector possibly taking advantage of slightly naive public authorities. Public authorities have got much smarter and realized it's a much harder proposition than perhaps they were sold to start with. So I think that's how I see the public private partnership question. I think the venture capital thing is a subset of that. I mean, venture capitalists put in very small amounts of money at a very early stage and are looking basically to come out once an idea is established. And they work on a portfolio, they spread money across a range of things. One of them becomes Amazon, they make lots of money, and the others fail, and that doesn't matter. That's basically the model. How does that work in your city context? That's the question you have to ask yourself. Why would I be looking for venture capital funding when actually I've got government behind me, I've got my own city resources, and I've probably got long-term commercial partners sitting in the city already who might be willing to do things with me? So these are the things I would be thinking about, rather than thinking, you know, let's go and find the venture capitalists. The venture capitalists will come in when they think they can make a quick buck. You know, we've seen lots of these startups with micro mobility scooters and things like that. It's been chaos in some cities. It's been very well done in others. So what we're back to how cities have set these things up, how they've encouraged them, how they've regulated them. You know, I'm not saying that you shouldn't have scooters in your city, but I'm saying that you need to think about how you do it and how you let the private sector use their money.
Thank you for that, and also for already touching on another question that was in the chat. May I turn to Marine now, and also to Brooke afterwards, because there is a question on the funding for the convention in Grenoble. And another question about how important low-tech, low-cost climate solutions are for the cities, and how citizens could be involved in these efforts. So please, Marine, on the convention first.
Yes, about the budget. So it's paid by directly La Métropole, and also a bit the state with a subvention, because we are a green capital. So by l'ADEME, the national agency.
Thank you. And I don't know, Brooke, if you want to come in on the low tech.
Sure. It all depends on what you define as low tech, really. You know, I think things, for instance, like insulation of buildings and things is probably relatively low tech. It's an established intervention that's been around for quite some time, well, for a very long time, really. So there are things like that. For instance, you know, citizens, you know, people who own their own homes can do things to their own homes. I mean, buildings are nearly 40%, just under 40% of emissions in the EU. So a huge proportion of cities' emissions are coming from buildings, energy use in buildings. So things that citizens can do around reducing the energy use in their own homes through a building renovation, insulation in particular, is a very good one. There's a lot of things that we can all be doing, I guess, in terms of changing our own behavior. That's, you know, we've touched on some things about sort of active travel, you know, walking and cycling rather than using cars. So there's quite a few things like that. I mean, there's things that people can be doing, you know, in their own gardens, improving. It's only small. Well, in a lot of cases, people's gardens are only small. You know, you can be changing what you plant there, you know, something that improving the biodiversity. You can be growing your own food. There's different things like that. Having things like allotments or public gardens for growing food. There's a lot of different low-tech solutions available as well. It's not about all the kind of new, pretty, shiny, busy things that that are exciting and also have potential. But, you know, a lot of things like that we're talking about here can actually make a significant difference, both to the kind of local environment, but also in terms of reducing emissions and reducing household energy bills.
Thank you very much for this inspiring examples. Then there are, I think, also two questions on the Recovery and Resilience Fund, asking about the implementation of the fund in cities, and asking also for best practice and guidance for the local municipalities on how to best use this money. Anyone who would like to go first on this? Yes, Patrick, please.
Well, I can have a go. I mean, I think that you know, the Next Generation EU and the Recovery and Resilience funds that go with that are indeed a very, very important potential source of funding for, you know, some of the green transition efforts that cities are making. I mean, you know how it works is that the member states have prepared their sort of national level recovery and resilience plans, which are then sort of discussed and sort of approved by the Commission, and before they are then, you know, moved into an implementation phase, during which we will, of course, support member state authorities in delivering the plans and monitoring that you know, they're being fulfilled in the way that was originally intended. So, I mean, in the first instance, where cities or other entities of regional government are beneficiaries or participating in some of the actions or programs under the National Recovery and Resilience strategies, they are, in the first instance, you know, working with the relevant national ministries in order to sort of see how that fits together. But we will be keeping a close eye on how the developments are going. I mean, I'm not expecting any further specific guidance. We produced a lot of guidance for member states at the beginning of the discussion on the post-COVID recovery to help them then draw up the plans, including the need for a strong emphasis on measures which will contribute to sort of medium, longer term action under the European Green Deal. But I think now things are moving ahead in a reasonably predictable manner.
Thank you very much, Patrick, on that. Anna, you wanted to come in, please?
Yes, I would like to come in from the national perspective, as I'm the representative of the Czech government as well, or the state administration. So yeah, indeed, those are the national states who drafted the programs, and with orientation to make the transition from the national perspective possible, not only the recovery measures, aiming at health issues, but also digitalization and of course, fulfilling carbon neutrality. So all the energy efficiency and renewable sources projects, but also the cities are the beneficiaries. And the RRF is not the only source. Actually, these days we do have also modernization fund for the Czech Republic and other Central and Eastern European states, but also we do have cohesion funds, whose are also a strong support for cities to implement different measures, not only from the energy perspective of climate resiliency, talking about greenery in the cities, but also talking about waste management and other measures. So going back to the original question, indeed, the times are challenging, and I would have to say that also the national states are taking, close eye on how we are able to use the funds available, and of course we would need to talk about the turbulent times within the economy and how it may hamper actually the possibility to implement the projects that are in place. But I think that's also what echoed Patrick, that also the national states and the European Commission are in close collaboration, especially when it comes to rescue and recovery fund.
Thank you very much for coming in on that. We also have a question that touches upon the behavioral change we were all talking about, and some attendee is asking if you think that in achieving the green transition in cities, is it better to regulate with permissions or to set incentives? Any views on that?
I'll comment on that one briefly. I think the answer in the end is probably a combination of both. It depends on what you're trying to do, the time frame in which you need to achieve it, the kind of level of this sort of appetite versus resistance. And obviously, if you have a perfect system of citizen participation and engagement, then incentives might be sufficient. But I think if you have to do things quite quickly, sometimes that requires something a little bit stronger. Also, sometimes it helps to set it helps to create some clarity and some certainty for investors as well, in having a sort of clear pathway through to something which may start with incentives and move to regulation to back that up. So a sort of regulatory backstop is often quite useful as well. So I would say it depends on the situation, but ultimately a combination of the two will be needed.
No, I would very much agree with what Brooke has said. I mean, I think it depends, as she says, on what you're trying to do. It depends on the political consensus in your city. I mean, I think regulation is very helpful because it gives people a stable perspective. Coercive measures can be rapidly overturned by new administrations. They have their role, they have their place, but you can't guarantee them forever.
Thank you. Any more comments on this one? No. We still have a question about the role of accession countries, but I'm not sure if anyone would like to comment on that.
Well, I can answer. I mean, the question is, I mean, in relation to the cities mission, are we also able to include cities from some of our neighboring countries? And the answer to that is yes. That as well as the 100 cities in the European Union, we have 12 cities in neighboring countries, including, I see that the participant is from Turkey. We have 2 cities from Turkey, which are Izmir and Istanbul. So indeed, we are using the openness that we have to include associated countries to Horizon Europe in order to bring them within the scope of the mission. We're also, by the way, thinking about whether we can do something in the Ukraine in the hope that we will soon be in a sort of post-conflict recovery phase, and where supporting cities in the Ukraine in a green and sustainable transition would also be, I think, very much appreciated.
So thank you for answering this one. There are more questions in the chat, but I think we're kind of running out of time, and we have already touched upon a lot of different issues. So maybe I just wanted to ask you, all of you on the panel, one last question. If you could think of one thing that should happen now immediately to support cities in their efforts to become more sustainable, and also support them, especially in their immediate efforts, of course, in mainly energy questions. What would that be in your opinion? Anyone who would like to go first? Patrick, yes.
I've still got my microphone on. I can.
Sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that what we're doing in the cities mission is that we're working with the cities on what we're calling climate city contracts. And so a sort of an overall strategy, which will have an action plan and crucially an investment strategy, which will show how we get from where we are today to climate neutrality in 2030. And in order to really make progress with that, we need to get all the actors around the table, including, as we've heard so much today, citizens really sort of having ownership of the whole discussion.
Thank you. Yes, Brooke.
Come in just to add on that, because I completely agree. It's hard to pick just one thing, but I think the thing that comes in with what Patrick is outlining there with the climate city contract and outlining the having a clear strategy or pathway to 2030 or to any other relevant outcomes of the Green Deal or sustainability. Is also bringing the funding and finance into alignment with that as well. So having a sort of clear program, but also moving, how a city is going to pay for this as well. So that's also a really crucial element, as well as not just the sort of local ecosystem governance, but as I've mentioned, the multi-level governance as well.
Thank you. Yes, Anna.
Well, maybe I would go, to the ground because currently all of us are, solving their energy prices and the bills. So the immediate reaction should be decrease the energy consumption. And we have seen it in the news. So cities are switching off the lights during the night, which is beneficial for the energy savings, but also to decrease the light pollution, for example, also decreasing the heating. So those are like the things that the city can do immediately. And then, of course, we need to have at least a little bit of time to have this strategy that would guide us to implement specific measures. And that is also the reason why we support a lot the Covenant of Mayors, which helps cities to develop emission action plans, energy action plans, and also adaptation action plans. And then the cities can use the funds available, not only from the national grants, but also from the banks. So immediate measures that can be taken, and then having this longer strategy. And even though talking for the experience from the Czech cities, that were not really that interested in joining Covenant of Mayors, we have, rocketing numbers of cities joining the Covenant throughout last year and this year, because the trigger is evident. and it will guide us further together with the cities and the national government.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Patrick, for pointing to the fact that you have to run to another meeting. Thank you so much for participating in the discussion, for answering the questions and your interesting contribution. So I'll let you go. Thank you so much.
Yeah, okay. Bye, colleagues.
Bye-bye.
And yes, before saying goodbye, please, Neil, also come in on the last question.
I was delighted with what both Brooke and Anna said. I think they both made excellent points. Just, I think, to close on, it's about sharing expertise and building capacity. I mean, it's about how do you make people understand what they can do? How do I do this? Who's done it before? What were the problems? Does that technology really work? It seems awfully expensive. Enabling cities to reach out and talk to each other, I think, is hugely important. And this is why, a number of the organization, Anna mentioned Covenant of Mayors, there's Eurocities, there's Civitas, there's lots of fora for us to discuss these things in. And I think that's really valuable, is sharing this experience. And that's one of the things. One of the reasons I'm here today is obviously is to talk to people, make people aware of what EIB can do. We need to keep educating each other. Is a big part of it. I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you. And Marin, you want to come in?
Yes, if I can add something, or for us, I think what will help us to be more sustainable, it's about how can we develop public transport? And we have a big project about RER à la Grenoble-Alpes, but we don't know how to finance it, so I think it's a big issue.
Thank you very much. You wanted to add something, Neil?
No, I was just going to say we know Grenoble well.
Okay.
So if Maureen wants to reach out, then please do.
Thanks.
Well, that's a perfect ending, I would say. And I just want to say thank you very much, all of our panelists, for participating in this interesting discussion, for the participants for asking questions. And please be assured the EPC will follow closely further developments on sustainable cities, but also on other topics. So please stay tuned for our future events. And thank you very much to the European Investment Bank for your support for this event, and have a lovely afternoon, all of you. Goodbye.
Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.